This is the part of the show where I say, if it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America on pwtorchdailycast.com, but it is clearly not Sunday yet. It is Saturday, but this is still Wrestling Night in America. I am Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Greg Parks here after WWE Money in the Bank, talking that show and more with pwtorch.com contributor Brandon LeClair, who I will bring on in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us here. I know that the Money in the Bank post show is going on as well, I believe, on Peacock. So I'm sure people in the chat will have their eye on that. Just a reminder that if you do want to be a part of the show, you can participate in the chat. We've got a couple on-site correspondents who will join us as well. Let me bring Brandon on to the stage. Brandon, thank you for joining me again tonight to talk Money in the Bank.
Of course, glad to be here.
And a few other reminders, you can email the show. We are usually here Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. This is your first time checking out the show. I know we're simulcasting on YouTube, Facebook, on X, and this is a whole new thing for us still. So if you're just checking us out, every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can be a part of the show by emailing wnialivecast@gmail.com. We have at least one email about Money in the Bank that we'll get to tonight, perhaps more as the show rolls on. And of course, you can become a member of the Torch, pwtorch.com/govip. Tons of audio, tons of written work. I do a weekly Parks' Take now, in addition to hosting Wrestling Night in America, writing a full-page column in every Torch newsletter. Yes, we still do the hard copy and the PDF version online. And you can also check out my VIP audio show, Greg Parks Out Loud. So all of that out of the way, Brandon, we're here to talk Money in the Bank. And I'll tell you this show is not short on newsworthy happenings. I'll say that. So perhaps the biggest of them and the most unexpected of them, John Cena made an appearance. He said that he would be retiring. His last match would be WrestleMania 2025, which gives me great column fodder for next week in the Torch newsletter about potential WrestleMania matches and potential final matches for him leading up to WrestleMania. Brandon, what did you think? Are you surprised that Cena set a date and that it wasn't just, hey, I'll wrestle a little while until the wheels fall off, maybe?
No, I think this sort of was the vibe that I've been getting from him the last couple of appearances that he's made, and also just sort of what the waters were like as far as hearing, through the grapevine and people talking online, that it seemed like he may want to announce a definitive end to his career, and that WrestleMania was seeming like a pretty good place to do that. So it didn't come as a surprise to me at all. It did come off a little strange at first, because I think the way that he framed it and the way that he started his promo almost seemed to indicate that he was just retiring tonight, that this was just the end.
Yeah.
And he had opted to do it in Toronto. But then he quickly, kind of recovered and clarified that this is sort of date one of a retirement tour. Mm-hmm. So I expect that we will probably see very little of him in the coming weeks and months, and then his appearances will start to pick up around Royal Rumble, and we'll probably get a full 3+ months of John Cena being a, either full-time or near full-time guy leading up to that big final event at WrestleMania. I like it. I mean, I like that we're having a definitive date for this. It's not at all unlike what AEW did with Sting, and I thought that they had a great deal of success doing it that way. So I think this is a good idea.
Yeah, I certainly was taken aback by it a little bit. It kind of came out of nowhere, which is fine. I think you're right. I think it's not going to all of a sudden be John Cena every week up until WrestleMania next year, right? Mm-hmm. I think I wouldn't even be surprised if he started a little more full-time at Survivor Series. It's still one of WWE's tentpole events. Cena might be interested in taking part in that. Even if it's not a singles match, if he's a part of a multi-man Survivor Series style match, that may interest him. But you're right. I think Royal Rumble, WrestleMania season, quote unquote, is really when we're going to start seeing Cena in overdrive. And I mean, look, the guy is in demand. He's always going to be part of the WWE. He has a lot of movie commitments. That's his job now. It's not WWE so much, but and I think it's probably going to get harder and harder the older he gets to constantly try to find time, not only to wrestle in between acting gigs, but also to, you know, do the necessary work to put in an acceptable performance in the ring. So I think that's
Mhm.
a big reason why he's doing this. And, I think it's there are a couple ways you can go out. You can go out the way I suggested, where you wrestle here and there in perpetuity, kind of like Brian Danielson, that soft retirement, where he's going to
Mhm.
retire from full time, but he never wants to stop wrestling. Or you could do what John Cena is doing, where you give a drop dead date and that's it. You'll come and make appearances, which I think are still valuable. And I would even say, I wonder if there is significantly more value in John Cena matches versus just John Cena being on the show. I kind of think they're pretty even these
Yep.
days.
Yep.
Um, and so I don't know that a lot of value is going to be lost from the WWE end by not having Cena actually advertised in a match versus just having him advertised making an appearance.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right at this stage of Cena's career, and I think that there is going to continue to be value in him making occasional appearances if he is willing and able to do that. I think that Cena has said from day one that it will always be his home, and I think he means that. I think he means that even more than someone like The Rock does when he says it. I think that Cena is always going to have a soft spot for WWE and want to return when he's able to. And I hope that when he says that this is it for his in-ring career, that he sticks to it. I mean, we've seen guys waver on that. It's sort of like a foregone conclusion in pro wrestling. Guys say they're going to retire. They have a big retirement ceremony or match, and then inevitably years down the road they go back on it. And I'm thinking, most recently of Shawn Michaels, where he stuck to his guns for years and years, and then eventually came out of retirement for a payday in Saudi Arabia, and it was not just uneventful and disappointing. It was flat out bad. So I hope that that's not the case with Cena. I also want to just mention, to kind of piggyback on what you said, Greg, about maybe him getting involved around Survivor Series time, is that even if it isn't on a full time schedule, WWE was in Boston this past Monday for Raw, and they announced a return date of December 16th for another episode of Raw. So while it is definitely possible that they do one more show in that market before WrestleMania, I would find it really hard to believe that Cena doesn't appear on that show, especially if it is the last stop before Mania, because there's no way that he's not going to do one more date in Boston.
Yeah, agreed. We will get to the rest of the card soon, but I do want to put on. We had a couple folks tuning in. pwtorch.com contributor Chris Lansdell was at the show, so we're going to put him on first. We've got another correspondent who's in the queue as well. So Chris, can you hear us?
I can, and I'm hoping I come through clear. I am on my phone still in the arena as they're cleaning up the mess, so hopefully this will work out.
Chris, we hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for offering your time here tonight as a live correspondent to Money in the Bank to give us a perspective. I'll be honest, and I posted this on X at Greg M. Parks as the show is beginning. My wife is Colombian, and Colombia soccer played at 6 p.m. tonight in the Copa. So that was the priority in our household. Her family came over to watch the game. So at 7, I had to get on my laptop and watch on Peacock. And they stayed and they're watching Brazil Uruguay in the other room. So if there's a loud cheer, it's because someone scored. So you're going to have to really help me out with the crowd reactions, because I didn't really get to experience that tonight as much as I otherwise would have. So, just overall, your thoughts on the event in terms of quality for this show?
Sure. So I should preface it by saying I was here last year for Forbidden Door, and this year being here for a WWE event, completely different vibe. It's also, I have my son with me who has never been to anything like this before, and he is still blown away. I'm not sure I can get a good word out of him, even if his voice worked to be able to say anything. The show was, I'd say, news-filled is probably the best way to put it. The three biggest pops of the night, and we were talking about this before I came on the air, were three people who weren't on the card. Well, two people and an object, and John Cena, CM Punk, and the tables. I think were probably the three biggest pops we got. The matches were kind of all over the place. The men's Money in the Bank was an incredible spectacle to start the show off, but then the women's one kind of fell short in a few places. There were a bunch of spots that were awkward, didn't come off. There's a lot of just no reaction. But to their credit, by the end of the match, I think they had really got the crowd into it. The main event, it felt like the crowd was flagging a little bit, but they were way more into hoping that Roman would show up than anything that was going on in the ring.
Yeah, I know that was kind of the rumor, wondering putting that in the main event spot if Roman Reigns was going to perhaps show up. I think it was a little too soon for that to happen, so I'm not exactly surprised that he didn't. Who are some of the most over acts? Certainly Chelsea Green seemed to be pretty over from what I heard, but who were the ones that got the most crowd reaction tonight?
So Chelsea and Tiffany both got a great reaction in the women's ladder match. Jey Uso's entrance, I mean, he was the first guy through the curtain, so it's clear that he was going to get a big reaction, but he was mega over. I'd say a good 80 to 90% of the crowd was doing the dance the whole time. For that matter, I didn't see a single empty seat anywhere. This place is absolutely packed tonight. LA Knight was not as over as he has been, but was still very over. Cody less over than Seth, I think. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the card, I mean, everyone was tired. I mean, we've been screaming all night, pretty much.
Yeah, it's definitely it seemed like Seth had a better reaction coming out. Those were the big ones for sure. CM Punk, obviously, the place blew up when he came in and cost Drew the cash in. Yeah, that's basically the biggest names.
Brandon, anything for Chris here from his live perspective?
Just talk about, if you can. I mean, you said you were at Forbidden Door in Toronto last year. You said it was a very different experience. Talk a little bit about just the dichotomy of the crowd, the different ways that they react. If you generally preferred one experience over the other, if they were both great for different reasons. Whatever you want to add about the differences between the two.
For sure. And it's an even more different perspective for us, because for us to get to any event, it's a 3-hour flight minimum. So we don't get to go to many. For Forbidden Door, the crowd was less willing to just accept everything that was happening as amazing. I believe there was a "This is awesome" chant in every single match tonight. And some of them were justified. Some of them definitely weren't. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily get that in AEW. They do it a lot, but if the match is bad, you're not going to get that chant. The crowd was into everything. They basically went along with what WWE would want them to do. I mean, Drew got a good pop when he first came out, but that died down to boos pretty quickly. There were some boos mixed in with the amazing cheers for CM Punk. But other than that, it was pretty much paint by numbers, follow along with the expected booking.
Were the Money in the Bank matches, were those sustained reactions throughout the entire match? Was the car crash element of any of those matches, did that wear out the crowd? Did you say, even by the end of the show? I know you said the crowd was kind of worn out by the end of the show. It was not a long show by pay-per-view or PLE standards. Yeah. Did the Money in the Bank matches and the style of those matches have to do, in your opinion, with the crowd kind of losing steam there at the end?
There's probably something to that. Opening with one of them was a good idea, and there was definitely a higher sustained energy level for the men's one. For the women's, there was practically no reaction for a couple of the participants. Andrade got no reaction for the men, but other than that, most people got a really good reaction. For the women's, though, there were a lot more people that just didn't get a pop when they came out. And they did build the match well. The crescendo was nice, and the crowd came along with them. But it was very much a spot cheer, die down, spot cheer, die down, which you didn't have for the men's match.
We talked about the John Cena retirement at the beginning of the show, and there was a little bit of confusion at first because it sounded like he was retiring tonight.
Yeah.
And then later he said he was retiring at WrestleMania. Did you sense any confusion in the building from that announcement? And what was the general reaction to Cena making this announcement in Toronto?
To be honest, when he was talking, my jaw was still sort of on the floor. I was not expecting that at all tonight. He's one of the few talents I had never seen live. And having heard his music hit was just a thrill, even for somebody who's not a huge fan. That said, I don't get the feeling that there was much confusion. Everybody was just too busy listening and chanting. So they knew what he was saying. I thought, yes, he's done. He's not wrestling at all. But once he explained it, there wasn't really any confusion because he made it very clear exactly what he was doing when he got to that point.
Yeah. Brandon, anything else for Chris?
Yeah, I thought tonight when watching that they went a little heavier than usual, even though it's been pretty obvious for a while now. But they really went hard with the significant breaks in between matches tonight, be it on promos or commercial breaks or whatever. Was that noticeable in the arena? Did it feel closer to a TV taping because of that? Or did you sort of appreciate the downtime as something opposed to, say, AEW that runs like at a breakneck pace with their pay-per-views?
So it's interesting because we're used to watching on TV, right? Like I know in the US, you get to see a lot more events live. For us, it's not as easy. But yeah, it was weird, especially because a couple of those video segments were not actually on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to hear them, but we didn't actually get to see what was going on. And there were sometimes the gaps between matches did feel a bit elongated. But, by the end of it, once the music started and for the next match, everything just sort of clicked into place.
Mm-hmm.
How obvious was the Damian Priest non-kickout of the Seth Rollins pinfall there at one point? Did everybody catch on to that? Was there kind of a negative reaction to that in the building? What would people think happened there?
I didn't hear much of a negative reaction. I was fully expecting a "you messed up" chant, although substitute the word "messed" for something I probably shouldn't say on YouTube. And we didn't get anything. It was very clear. My son and I both looked at each other and just sort of went, "Oops." But no, I didn't hear a chant. Did you hear one? No. It was almost like everybody just accepted that it was a mistake and moved on, which is incredible maturity for a crowd of wrestling fans, and definitely wouldn't have happened at Forbidden Door.
Yeah, agreed. Is there anything else before we let you go that you want to make mention of that maybe the crowd at home or the viewers watching on Peacock or WWE Network didn't see? Anything else to note?
I think it's interesting that Trish Stratus seemed to get no reaction at all. And that's probably because we saw her 4 times tonight. She came out and did the anthems. Well, she introduced the anthem singers. They showed her arriving, and then she came out in front of the live crowd and on TV twice. So the reaction just got lesser and less each time. She did get a good pop the first time. Other than that, it was a good show. Like, everybody was into it. I didn't really feel at any point that the crowd had stopped paying attention. The energy level definitely wasn't there for the main, but I think that was more because they were tired than they went into it.
Brandon, anything else for Chris before we bring on our next live correspondent?
No, I don't think so, but really good insight for the live experience for sure.
Yep. All right, Chris, appreciate you calling us up here as you're exiting the arena. Thanks so much. Good to hear from you. And enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, we thank Chris. And don't forget, if you ever want to be a live correspondent to any of these shows, we go on the air live after AEW and WWE pay-per-views and PLE. So if you are ever at a live show and want to call in, we'll be happy to take you. Just send me an email, wnialivecast@gmail.com, and I'll give you the information that you'll need to call in and give us your live perspective. We have another live correspondent here. Highton is on with us. Good evening, sir. What did you think of Money in the Bank? And by the way, thank you for being our live correspondent tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Greg. Hey, Brandon. This is a fantastic event, honestly. But I'm probably biased because it was my first wrestling show that I've ever been to, and I mean, what a show to go to! Just the I've never been around this many wrestling fans all at once, and it was honestly a surreal feeling. I think I probably had more fun than the previous live correspondent that was on, but it may even just be the aura of novelty, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad we're getting that perspective from you as a first-time live event viewer. And wow, what a first-time event to be at for sure. So, I mean, what, how did it meet or differ from your expectations of a live event?
I thought that the seat that I had would sort of dampen my enjoyment of the show, and it didn't really. When you get inside the arena, it actually looks better than the fan cam footage, any fan cam footage on YouTube would suggest. And so you get a very clear view of, virtually everything. You just have to hope that the person's, sitting in front of you isn't really standing up all that much. And the guy was for me, but if he can stand, I can stand. So honestly, it didn't really bug me. I soaked all the energy in. It was, I think I got a little nervous one time when there was contentious, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre chants, or, CM Punk and he sucks type of dueling chants. It sort of got a little heated there between a couple of people in my section. But I mean, overall, people were relatively friendly, I would say.
Well, that's awesome. And glad to hear about the friendliness of the fans. That's not always the case. So that's definitely a good sign. Was there anything that surprised you about this live event experience? Anything from, the time that you got out of your car from wherever you parked to the time that you're talking to us right now? Anything surprising?
Dude, so I didn't drive here. I came with public transit, but honestly, I was in line at like 4 p.m. Eastern, and I didn't actually get to my seat until 5:30. The line was crazy long. I was not expecting, and I took the line at a very good gate because we walked right past the pre-show. And man, the pops for people like Michael Cole, Wade Barrett, Big E. It just seemed like these people were here to enjoy wrestling, enjoy people they've seen on TV for a while. I don't really know how to rate the pops, to be honest. If I had to say one person, like, I'd say Jey Uso probably got the loudest sustained pop. And yes, sure, he was the first one to come out. But also the merchandise. I mean, I see Yeet shirts more than I see Cena shirts, more than I see Austin 316 shirts, more than I see Money in the Bank merchandise. There's Yeet everywhere. And definitely all through the pre-show, they were chanting Yeet. When they interviewed Jey Uso backstage, it was just Yeet mania, to be honest with you. And I don't know if it's the catchphrase alone. When Jey Uso came out, he looked like a larger-than-life star. And obviously, by the end of the match, you realize, yeah, Drew's the real big shot. But yeah, the thunder, I would say, for Jey Uso, I'd say it dwarfed. I think maybe Cena just kind of dwarfed him a little, but Jey Uso was up there. Him, LA Knight, Cody, I'd sort of put them kind of in the same league when it comes to crowd pops. That surprised me. I didn't think Jey Uso would be this over.
Sean giving you a shout out in the chat. Love to see that. Brandon, any questions for a first time live viewer here for Money in the Bank?
Yeah, this is more evergreen rather than the show itself, but I'm very much intrigued by, talking to someone who hasn't been to one of these shows before. It's a really cool perspective to get. So just thinking about my first times going to different wrestling companies over the years and stuff, and wondering if you were taken aback or surprised by anything in particular, by any particular wrestlers, being it, their size, their star power, their presence, somebody much bigger in person than you anticipated, smaller, much more over than you thought, anything really.
Yeah, absolutely. Jey Uso, for one, the dude just came across as a megastar just for me. And it was probably also the section I was in. Um, LA Knight, I think, rivaled that kind of pop. Cena obviously got the biggest pop, I would say, bar none, but they were up there. When it comes to people looking larger than life, honestly, all of them. I mean, I look at the wrestlers, I look at the fans. Even though someone like Chad Gable, he just he's not the tallest guy in the world. When he came out, like I noticed him. He's like he shines, on the way to the.
Mhm.
I don't know what they're putting on themselves, but they WWE definitely knows how to make their stars, pop to the eye, so to speak. Drew McIntyre definitely towered over everyone. I heard people in my area saying basically, how tall is this guy again? Um, and that sort of stuff. It's also easier to notice botch spots, I would say, because WWE's camera work is kind of good at hiding that. EO, I think, messed up a few times. Um, and some of the spots look a little bit more dangerous. I think Sami Zayn was leaping off the barricade, and Braun just had to catch him at a clutch moment. I heard people around us saying that, for a new guy, that he certainly knows how to catch. And just these little things you don't really, or at least I don't really pay much attention to when I'm watching on TV. I'm just sort of engrossed by the production of it all. I'm just able to pay attention to a lot more moving parts, I would say. And I'm able to pick up on these things. Wrestlers getting ready for their entrance while the other wrestlers' entrance music is still going on. They've still, kind of come in. It's all a lot to take in. Like I have a lot of sensory overload right now, to be honest with you. But it's I mean, I wouldn't trade this experience. It was definitely much better. I mean, objectively speaking, it was more newsworthy than the last two pay-per-views, PLEs, I should say, that WWE had. So, I say money well spent.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when I take a non-fan to a wrestling event, one of the things that they tell me is the punches look more pulled, the all that kind of stuff. It doesn't look as crisp, it doesn't look as tight when you're there live. And I think you mentioned the camera work, and I think that's one of the big reasons why. Was there anyone who impressed you more than expected? You're used to watching these guys on TV. You've seen them on TV for however long you've been watching. Is there anyone you came away from tonight thinking, wow, they're a lot better live than I thought they were?
Yeah, definitely. Jey Uso, I will say, I think he just has a way of engaging a live audience in a lot more of a compelling way than a TV audience. I don't think I'm gonna all of a sudden become Jey Uso's number one fan on TV, but when he's wrestling live, there's just something about him. Chad Gable, I will say, him and Solo are the only two people who had genuine heel heat. And I sort of knew that about Chad. I think people are pretty interested in the story, and we heard the FU Solo chants last SmackDown as well, and just hearing that now, I think I have maybe a bit of an enhanced appreciation for both of them, because this crowd was into everybody, even the heels. They cheer for them, at least the people in my section. But Solo's clearly doing something to piss off the audience. One more thing I want to make notice of is I will say Damian Priest. I like his presentation. He definitely looks bigger, watching him live. But there is a bit more aggressive apathy toward him, at least in the area that I'm in. His near falls didn't really get, heavy crowd investment. People weren't. I heard a lot of bondage taker chants. I heard a lot of Walmart taker chants, or just general Undertaker chants when he was wrestling. It's sort of, I'm not the biggest Priest fan in the world, but I like the guy, and it was a little sad coming out of that. And I'm like, you combine that with him almost getting a visible pinfall. Even though he retained the title, it didn't seem like he had a good night out today.
Yeah, definitely. It was not his best night, and I think you could tell that on his face after the match. What did you think was the best match, quality wise, of the night?
I mean, crowd heat in my section was hottest for the main event, just because when you combine Cody, KO and Randy Orton, people are just into their moves. They have such a vested, interest from people over the years of their body of work. But I'll say athletically, it was probably one of the two ladder matches, in my opinion. Maybe the women's match just sort of exceeded my expectations in terms of, a lot of the women are fairly new, but I didn't expect Chelsea to get the pop that she did, and she got a sustained pop. The crowd was really into her. They told a great story with her. She came really close to pulling the briefcase down. Tiffany Stratton, super over, especially given how relative short length of time she's been on TV for. The only person the crowd didn't care about in that match was I even forgot her name now. Trish Stratus's protege, who she used to be. I haven't followed TV for a little bit, but
Zoe Stark.
No, it's Zoe Stark. Did I forget that? Yeah, no, I would say women's ladder match probably tips the men's ladder match by just a little bit, marginally, but not too distant. Honestly, it was overall a pretty good show.
Brandon, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right, Hayden, thank you so much for joining us and volunteering to be our on-site correspondent. And really cool that it was your first live event. Glad you had a great time.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah,
absolutely. Wow, 2 live correspondents. We're doing pretty well. I enjoyed that. We also have Hendrik in New Jersey, who's going to join us here and give his thoughts. So we'll put him on. Hendrik, welcome to Wrestling Night in America. We've heard from you before in our previous incarnations, so it's always a little different getting to see people and talk to them. So thank you for joining us tonight. And what did you think of Money in the Bank?
I thought it was overall kind of a mediocre show. It wasn't bad by any means, but I think it really lacked that big pop at the end where it was just the Bloodline winning, and that was it. No Roman, no whatever.
I think people did expect some more fireworks, Brandon, from that than we got, whether it was Roman Reigns appearing or whether it was something just bigger happening. And maybe WWE thought, hey, Solo Sikoa over Cody Rhodes is going to be talked about as a big deal. The in-ring debut of Jacob Fatu is going to be talked about as a big deal. Maybe that's all we need. But did you get the same sense that it was almost, I hate to say anticlimactic at the end of it, but given the heightened expectations that come with this match and what we've expected, I mean, the last 2 Bloodline matches have been debuts of wrestlers. So, there was no debut of a Hikuleo or anybody else that's expected to join the Bloodline. Was it anticlimactic the way it ended?
I thought I even hung around the Peacock broadcast for a couple of minutes longer than I usually would, because the way that they transitioned into the post show, going back to the pre-show desk with Jackie Redmond and company, I wondered if maybe they were going to shoot an angle and that it wasn't the actual end of the official show, because they transitioned so seamlessly from the main broadcast into the post show. I thought that they really did a disservice to the quality of the show overall by not switching the world title match with the 6-man. We had heard rumors earlier in the day and earlier in the week that the world title match was going to main event, and I thought that there were enough shenanigans in that match to, number one, warrant it having the main event slot, because you're going to build all this heat toward McIntyre and Punk. Fans are going to be anticipating the McIntyre cash in. You have people wanting Seth Rollins to win the championship. There's the will he or won't he of Finn Balor and whether he's going to get involved. They had a lot of moving parts that made that world title match feel like a good match to put in that main event slot, especially given how poorly defined the world champion has been during this run. I just think it sent the wrong message to put that in the middle of the show when you didn't have a major angle to close the night out. It was just the Bloodline wins.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's going to be something that's talked about coming out of the show. I think there's a lot of positive vibes coming out of the show, but the match order and not putting the title match on last, I think is going to be a decision that does get questioned in some circles. Hendrik, what else did you think of the show here tonight?
Well, I just wondering how you feel about CM Punk these days. Does he seem like a heel? Because he seems like a heel to me. I mean, he just keeps screwing Drew McIntyre over and over again, and it gets a bit redundant, and it's like, all right, dude, get over it.
Yeah, I did a 12-minute hot take with Wade right here on the pwtorch YouTube page a couple weeks ago, I think after the last pay-per-view. And that was kind of my argument, right? It was, is CM Punk acting more heelish? I thought that at the time. I think that Drew McIntyre has done enough on TV to sort of overtake that. I mean, it's almost like dueling heels. Like 1 week Punk is more of a heel, 1 week Drew McIntyre is more of a heel. You know, certainly I don't think it's a Drew McIntyre babyface CM Punk heel. I don't think it's a double turn or anything like that. But I just think Punk is going overboard. And so to some people, that's heelish. To some people, that's just simply going overboard as a babyface. And Brandon, after the latest CM Punk costing Drew McIntyre, where do you land on this whole CM Punk thing? Is it too much at this point for someone who is supposed to be a babyface?
I think it's still getting over in a babyface way. I mean, obviously, they sort of had the roadblock of Clash at the Castle, where there was no way that Punk wasn't going to be booed opposite of Drew McIntyre in McIntyre's hometown. But since then, it hasn't really been much of an issue. I think that Punk is probably more likely to get a heel reaction if he's opposite of Seth Rollins, which they certainly teased tonight. But against McIntyre, it feels like crowds are pretty firmly in his corner, regardless of location, with that one exception being McIntyre's hometown. So I suspect they're going to continue down this path and at least get through the McIntyre feud before they toy with the idea of turning Punk. And I think that's fine. I think they've done a really good job of building interest in this feud, and I've enjoyed what they've been doing. My one concern and my one criticism of this angle is just that all the build and hype that they're putting into it is coming at the expense of the World Championship, which was already at a weakened point, being on Damian Priest, who had not previously been defined as a main event guy, and since being elevated into a main event role hasn't been winning matches in any way other than basically being inadvertently helped by CM Punk.
Yeah, a couple things to note before I go back to Hendrik here. First of all, you know, Punk is going above and beyond, but also Drew McIntyre did attack and lay out Punk in Chicago, bloodied him, took his wristband, whatever you want to call it, that has his wife's name and his dog's name on it, and gloats about it. So, yes, Punk has escalated, but McIntyre has escalated in certain respects too. So, I think this attack coming on the heels of McIntyre's own attack on Punk evens the score a little more, and I don't see it more Punk being a heel the way I did before, because it felt like it was all Punk getting revenge for that one thing that McIntyre did, and it was just too much. Now McIntyre has done something else, and now Punk is going back and getting revenge for that. The other thing is, I'm a little more accepting of this attack because of that interaction with Rollins at the end. You know, Rollins was a guy, if you remember, when Punk debuted last year, it was Rollins who pitched a fit in the ring to the point that people didn't know whether it was legitimate or not. So now Rollins has beef with Punk in addition to Punk having beef with McIntyre. And I think that's something that may simmer for a little while, but I think that's going to come to the fore eventually as well. And I think they're going to continue planting seeds in that direction. Hendrik, anything else for us about Money in the Bank tonight?
Yeah, one last thing. Do you think they missed the boat with Chelsea Green? Because I don't see her getting another opportunity anytime soon. I think Tiffy time could have been any time because she's so talented. But I think like a run with Chelsea Green as like this Money in the Bank contract holder that is just like kind of a buffoon, but like she always like comes close but loses or whatever. And she could have been the first woman to ever lose it. I think they missed out, in my personal opinion. How about you?
I'm glad you brought that up because she did a great job in this match. I mean, she was really entertaining. She has been entertaining for a long time. I think it all depends on what you think that kind of act, what its place in WWE is. Is it just kind of like the R-Truth mid-card comedy act, or does it really have legs, and is it really a worthy enough act to hold the Money in the Bank briefcase? I would not have complained if Chelsea Green had won. I thought it was kind of tailor-made for Tiffany Stratton. I thought this was her moment. I thought it was the right time to have her take the briefcase and really continue that ascension that she started, way back even in Elimination Chamber. And as our live correspondents noted, the fans were super behind Tiffany Stratton, in addition to Chelsea. But Brandon, I mean, is there a risk giving the Money in the Bank briefcase to someone with the character of Chelsea Green, where it's not a really serious character? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they would have been fine. They've done enough over the years to sort of put the briefcase on different types of characters. The closest thing, I guess, if Chelsea had been the one to win it, I mean, the closest one you could really compare her to would have been someone like Otis, and unfortunately, that's not a great comparison because Otis never got to cash in the briefcase. So it's kind of hard to say what they might have done with Chelsea there. But going into this match, it felt to me like there were only two women who really made any sense, and it was the two women at the end of the match, Chelsea Green and Tiffany Stratton. I think that they both would have been good options. I think that Chelsea would have brought a certain levity to the briefcase that we don't always see, and it would have been a lot of fun to see her sort of fumble through different attempts at cash-ins. Ultimately, I think that she probably would have been the first woman to lose the cash-in, which I'm in favor of introducing that to the women's side because as of right now, they have a 100% success rate. So it is about time that they have a woman cash in and not win the title. She would have been a good candidate.
I don't think that's going to be Tiffany Stratton.
No, I don't either. That's just it. So yeah, she would have been a good candidate for that. But at the same time, Tiffany Stratton kind of got the tailor-made signature WWE build up to this, where she sort of de-emphasized on TV. Greg, you and I talked about that during our preview last week at the end of the Forbidden Door show. Was the de-emphasis on Tiffany Stratton more about the post she made on Instagram, or was it more about priming her for this Money in the Bank win? And I came down on the side of it being somewhere in the middle. I thought it was a little bit of both. And I think tonight sort of, kind of further cemented my feeling that at least it had something to do with the fact that they were priming her for this moment. I think she's a really fun briefcase holder who can hold the briefcase for a while. But I think the same thing of Chelsea Green. And that's going to be important because they spent the men's one right away tonight. And usually they like to dump one right away, keep one for several months.
Yeah. All right, Hendrik, thank you so much for joining us. Good to hear your perspective and your thoughts on Money in the Bank tonight.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Brandon. Rude Dog says goodbye.
All right, we have one more character to bring on the show, and this is Sean from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Sean, good to hear from you again. I know we like to hear from you after these pay-per-views and PLEs. Haven't had the chance to since we've moved to the new format. How are you doing tonight?
Because it'll be sad if I don't get to talk to him again, like actually on a on a call of some kind. And Brandon, it's always good to talk to you, man. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well, Sean. Thank you.
I can't tell you how glad I am that we're 45 minutes into this show already, and it is just past 11 on a Saturday night.
Yes.
That's great.
Amen to that.
It is
Amen to that.
well, I mean, you're talking to two guys who were up till 2 a.m. at least last Sunday, just a week ago for Forbidden Door. So if
Yeah.
I had to weigh those two, definitely feeling tonight a lot better.
Yeah, and so I guess my first thought was, and I put a super chat up, and I'll just talk about that because I've had it on there, and you don't have to worry about going back to it. But I'm with you. Like, I loved that Drew won, and I loved that he cashed in right away because I wanted to get rid of one of them right away. So I was excited they did that, and I thought Punk coming in was perfect. I mean, the setup for their feud, going back and forth with each other. Punk, like, he got bloodied up. He did the babyface thing to do. He's going to retaliate. You're going to get bloodied. You're going to come back and want revenge. I mean, you're going to do that. I mean, so it makes sense of what they're doing. I love the feud they're building up to SummerSlam. I think it's going to be cool. My only worry is I just hope Punk can stay healthy. That's my only concern about that. Other than that, the match I think is going to be fantastic. I'm so curious to see how they build up to this. But yeah, I'm with you guys as far as I think Priest, I honestly thought was having a really good match up until the spot that Zach Haydorn actually showed it on. You know, the knee did hit his head pretty hard, and I think it did knock him out, and that's why he didn't get it. So I just thought up until then it would have been fine. You know, Drew could have cashed in triple threat, whatever. You know, well, that necessarily fine. I mean, for the story they're telling, I just it's the world just hasn't. Even though I think Priest has done a good job overall, I still think the world title does feel diminished when you do it the way they've been doing it in with that title match. It just kind of hurts it a little bit. But I thought overall they kind of got stuck and he had just no other option to kind of like stop the count. He can't count because Seth wins. Stuff happens. And he was a really good spot, so I felt for him in that moment. But I wanted to real quick bring up the Cena super chat. I mean, it was cool to see him. I'm glad that WrestleMania will be it as far as him getting in the ring. Like, I'm happy about that. I just don't want to see Cena in a WWE ring in a wrestling match anymore. I just don't. Nobody needs to see it. He had a great run for a long time. He comes to talk to the fans. I don't have an issue with people. The last two matches we've seen him in, with Theory at WrestleMania last year and Solo at the Saudi Arabia show, yes, he put them over. Oversells now like crazy. I don't really want to see him match anymore. So am I crazy to think that, okay, no, this will be the last run he's got? I just wish he'd just go away off to be a great spot. We don't need to see John Cena. Let's say he puts over, which, I mean, you could talk about the matches he could have. I think, you know, with Braun or Braun Breaker or Carmelo or two guys, you know, yeah, I think a match with them would be okay because it would put them over and to give them some kind of spotlight. But he just doesn't do anything. And I'm a Cena fan more than some, but he just doesn't do it for me anymore. I don't need him to see him in matches. What do you guys think?
Cena is a guy who has not aged terribly well as far as his in-ring. And, you know, he's a guy who, I mean, he was awkward and clunky even in his prime. You know, he was a different kind of athlete than a lot of the other wrestlers. I mean, he's still athletic for sure, but he had that awkwardness about him. He was not a smooth athlete in the ring, even in his prime, and that's deteriorated since he's gone from being full-time to coming in every year or every 2 years or whatever it's been since he left to go to Hollywood. So, you know, it goes back to one of the points that I made when we first talked about this at the beginning of the show is I'm not sure if there's really any difference these days in John Cena as an attraction appearing on a show versus John Cena wrestling on a show. And I'd be curious if there was any kind of numbers to back that up. You know, certainly a guy, Brandon, of John Cena's caliber, of his history, he is, whatever you say about him today in the ring, he is deserving of going out his own way, he is deserving of having his last match at a WrestleMania. So I cannot fault him, and I can't fault WWE for deciding to do this. But what did you think of Sean's point that, I mean, is there really much to gain these days from John Cena, the in-ring performer?
I don't think there is that much to gain. I think that the counter argument isn't so much in favor of saying, "Oh, Cena's going to go out there and have barn burners with a whole bunch of guys." It's more. I think the counter argument is more just there isn't anything to lose. I think it's sort of. I think it's sort of status quo either way, whether you have him in the ring or you have him just making appearances on a semi-regular basis. I think that the matches will be fine enough to get by. I mean, he's not going to go out there and completely stink up the joint. And I do have faith that if Cena is given time to prep and he is on television regularly and perhaps wrestling semi-regularly, that he might at least be a little bit better than he has been in these previous showings. At least that's my hope. And I think he's earned it. Like you said, Greg, I think he's earned the right to go out the way that he wants to go out. I don't think that he'll necessarily be out there bigfooting a bunch of guys, but I think that there's probably guys that he'd like to work with before hanging it up once and for all. And then there's probably also, he probably also wants to play the hits to some extent too. Like he may want to work with a few guys one more time. I mean, like I hope that we can get through those months without seeing a Randy Orton match. I don't want to see John Cena versus Randy Orton in 2025. But yeah, I mean, I think that Cena is an interesting character because he's so important to WWE's legacy, but he is the beacon and the stalwart of a down period. And all of Cena's years on top are marked by generally poor business, and he deserves a ton of credit for keeping the company afloat during those toughest times. But wrestling has changed dramatically since Cena aged out of being a full-time wrestler, and he is going to have to adjust both his expectations and I think the crowd's expectations for what he's going to do when he's wrestling a newer generation, and even guys who he's faced before, but who have upped their game or changed their game significantly just since he's left.
I did pose the question on X, who should John Cena's last match be against? And someone did reply, Randy Orton. I can't tell if they were trolling or if that was a legitimate response. But I can't. I mean, from a historical perspective, that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
But from do I want to see that match in 2025?
No,
thanks.
Absolutely
Sean,
not.
anything else about Money in the Bank tonight?
I just wanted to go with what you said, Brandon, and I agree with you on Cena. Like, I don't disagree. I mean, Cena's had an amazing career. He did a lot for the company for a long period of time. There's no denying that. I mean, I'm a fan. He can go out however he wants. And that's true too. That's a good point you brought up. I don't know. I just don't really. I don't need a but as long as and somebody said, I think somebody brought up Cena and Cody. I'm like, no, absolutely not. That would be the worst thing. Cody needs to be, if you, by God, if you decide you want to do that and they somehow went through with it, man, Cena better be serious, because I do not want a joke of a feud there, because we just don't need it. I mean, Cody needs some serious things to do, and that would worry me big time. But we'll see where they go with it. So I'm intrigued to see what they do. I mean, he does deserve that part. Going back to the show overall, I thought very, very good. I still thought it was a really good show, really enjoyable show. Like you said, 3 hours, 15 minutes. Going back to Braun Sammy, I thought the match was again really, really good. I thought they both put in a really good effort. Sammy's been good for a long, long period of time. Braun has, to me, done a really good job since they brought him on the main roster of just being a badass. I'm assuming Sammy won because he's in his hometown and he lost there last year to Roman. I'm assuming that's part of what they're doing here, or that was the thought process. And they could obviously go back to this at SummerSlam, and that's where I'm assuming they're going, is building up to a rematch. Braun maybe getting his heat back on Monday and just kind of starting where they got and just kind of build up from there and go to SummerSlam. I really wanted Braun to win the title tonight. I think if you're going to build him up strong, I think he needs to beat a guy like Sammy, Sammy's not going to lose anything. I know it's in Toronto. I know they'd be sad. It's okay, guys. It's okay if you lose in your hometown. Sammy is a made man. He's going to eventually, in my opinion, go back to the Bloodline story at some point in time. I just think Braun needs a big win, and I thought they kind of missed the boat there. What did you guys think about the match, and what did you think about the finish?
We had an email about this match specifically, which we don't get very often. Usually, if someone emails us after a pay-per-view or a PLE, it's about the show as a whole. But Finey said, boy, this was a good match. Braun easily among the most physically gifted wrestlers to come along in this last decade. People may forget that before his uncle became Big Papa Pump, he was also a 250-pound specimen who was ridiculously impressive from the mat to the top rope. Congrats to Sammy, but the sky is the limit for Braun. So, this is another one. It's sort of like Tiffany Stratton and Chelsea Green. I could have gone either way on that. Same thing here, Brandon, with Braun Breaker and Sami Zayn. I thought this was a match where you could have really done a title change, especially on a show that you didn't have a title change. So you could have gotten away with it and it would have felt special, I think. Maybe WWE felt they had enough going on with the Money in the Bank cash in and John Cena's retirement that they didn't want Braun Breaker's first title on the main roster, his first win, to get kind of lost in the shuffle. Sami Zayn getting the win, does it lead to Braun Breaker rematches where he beats Zayn perhaps at SummerSlam? Does it lead to something bigger for Braun Breaker? I think, if you're looking at this as a test for Braun Breaker to pass, I think he certainly passed it against Sami Zayn here. So I am curious as to where he goes next. Brandon, if you were booking this out, would you have had Breaker win the title here?
Yeah, few things here. First, really strong match. I thought it was really, really good. Sammy is so good at playing the underdog babyface, and I noted in my report too for pwtorch that Braun has been, despite working like a heel, has been getting a lot of babyface reactions just because of the ferocity and the just his movements, his athleticism, the way that he executes moves. It's very babyface in nature, even if he's playing the heel. And Sammy is so good in his role that he still managed to obtain the vast majority of sympathy from this crowd. So I thought that was really noteworthy. I thought that they told a really compelling and effective story, and I thought the announcers helped sell the idea that the only thing that was going to stop Braun Breaker from winning this match was him being overzealous in his pursuit of the title, and I think that's ultimately what got him here. I think that there's going to be the quick reaction is going to indicate that this was a mistake, that Breaker should have won the title, and I totally get that perspective, and history may end up proving that correct. But just a few things to note here that they might be going for, and why they might have gone in this direction. So, for one, Zayn has really only been engrossed in this 3+ month feud with Chad Gable. He hasn't really had any other big victories beyond that. I mean, there's Bronson Reed, but he's not really a pushed act at this point, so I'm not counting that as a big victory in Sammy's Intercontinental title run. I think,
and there is the thought that if you beat Gunther, you should have a meaningful, lengthy run, right?
And
coming
that's
off of that victory.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with that. I think that having Sammy be the one to dethrone Gunther makes them more likely to put some additional effort into lining up really credible challengers for Sammy, so that it doesn't feel like, one, his win against Gunther was a fluke, and two, that he shouldn't have beat Gunther in the first place. I think that there's probably a pretty good chance that we get a rematch for this at SummerSlam. My thought was, so coming into the show, I thought that this was going to be a non-finish. I didn't think they were going to switch the title tonight, but I didn't think that Sammy would just beat Braun flat out. I thought that they were headed in the direction of a multi-man match at SummerSlam that also included Sheamus and Ludwig Kaiser, because they've been so involved in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they don't go that direction, but both Sheamus and Ludwig Kaiser have beef with Braun Breaker. And by extension, they're both gunning for the Intercontinental title. We've seen Ludwig say it on TV, and we know Sheamus wants that title because he's never held it. So that to me was the direction that they were headed, but maybe now it isn't. Maybe the plan is just to go straight up Sammy and Braun one-on-one in a rematch where Braun wins the title at SummerSlam. That gets him the championship win on a bigger stage. It protects Sammy to some extent because he gets that win over Braun Breaker. And then it also frees up Sammy for the fall to be a potential challenger for Gunther.
As good as this match was, it did feel like there was another gear that these two could have gone to, or that there was more left on the table from an in-ring perspective that you could see if they do a one-on-one rematch at SummerSlam. Sean, anything else for us tonight here after Money in the Bank?
Yeah, all good points. So the last thing I guess I'll bring up was, well, the main event was fine. I mean, ref bumps, do I need them? No, I don't need them. But
Bloodline
it told
special.
us, yeah, right. It told the story it needed to tell. Like the Bloodline's over strong. It was good. Can't wait till Roman comes. I'm assuming at SummerSlam, it's going to be just a phenomenal pop. It's going to be awesome. I'm glad to see the build to that. Just going back to the women's ladder match really quick. The men's ladder match was obviously better, just a better overall story in the match. The women's match was definitely still good for what my thing is. I know we've talked about this, I think, before, but the women, they try to do as much as the men do as far as like a lot of the spots. And some of those spots were scary. I hope Io and Zoe are okay. That was a really, really scary spot on the ladder. And I hope they're okay. I mean, ladder matches, I mean, we're doing them overall too much as a whole. I mean, I wish Money in the Bank was the only time we were doing them, but we have them at different times of the year, and that just kind of numbs you to some of the spots that happen in a lot of these ladder matches. But that one, and even Chelsea, thank goodness, I think she went pretty safe through the tables at the end of the match, which made me feel good when I saw the replay again. I was like, all right, she did go pretty safe, but that is a scary thing to do, man. Sending a woman that far down through tables. I'm just like, you gotta be. What do you guys think? Are they trying to do too much? Again, I love the women. I'm always going to advocate for them. And I think the match overall was still really good. But was it a little too strong for you as far as the spots? And would you try to tone it down a little bit? And that's all I had, guys. Go VIP. Brandon, Greg, I appreciate both of you guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course, Sean, thank you for joining us. Sean, a VIP member. That's how he gets his spot in line here. So always love hearing from him and them. That's a slippery slope, I think, in terms of toning down the women. I think, you go through before the show, you go through spots you want to do. You want to make sure there's a way to do them carefully. You want to make sure that all the participants are confident in those spots, and you want to make them as safe as possible, and you want to make everybody as confident as possible. And if there's hesitation, if there's a spot that could go awry, I think I'm of the opinion better safe than sorry. There are a lot of top tier matches in wrestling history that I've loved that are not nearly as dangerous as some of the matches we saw tonight. So, I mean, it can be done. It's not necessary. I know expectations in these types of matches always get pumped up because you're always trying to chase what you did before and do it better and make it look riskier while making it as safe as you possibly can. And I think that's the sweet spot. Can you make it look risky, but make it ultimately safe, or as safe as you can? So I guess I'm of the mind that the performers themselves, the people with years of experience who put these matches together, know better than I do. And if something looks dangerous to me and I worry, maybe that's the point. That's the reaction you're trying to elicit out of fans. And so long as nobody is seriously injured, I mean, Brandon, how many wrestlers have we seen get injured from, elementary moves that you don't imagine would injure anybody? So even the safe moves aren't always necessarily safe. So I just think it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah, like you said, it's a slippery slope. I mean, there's no safe form of pro wrestling. I mean, it's you can do things that enhance safety. You can do things to try to make it as safe as possible. But like any sport, whether it's simulated or not, the risk is inherent to the action. So I think that we have sort of crossed a threshold where there's a certain expectation for these ladder matches and they compound. So one after the other, they up the ante on each other. And WWE does them, AEW does them, and in this particular instance, it was particularly noticeable because they came 1 week after the other. AEW just did their multi-person ladder match last week at Forbidden Door. WWE follows up with a show themed around the idea of a multi-person ladder match tonight. And they're all trying to one up not just each other and the matches taking place earlier in the night, but the now years of history we have of these matches. I noted this in my report for pwtorch, as I do seemingly every year with Money in the Bank. They're fun car crashes. They're entertaining and enjoyable to watch. I wince at moments. I cringe at moments. I think that is what they are designed to do. If I have a critique or a knock on them, is that they all blend together to me. I occasionally, or most of the time, I'll remember the winners. I might remember how they cash in, but I remember very little about the beat to beat story and actions of the match. I am far more likely to remember major details of a wrestling match that's just a one-on-one between two really good wrestlers than I am these multi-man car crashes with big spots that are designed specifically to stick in your mind. So I think that at some point you reach a point of diminishing returns, and we probably passed that a long time ago. But there's so much inertia to these matches at this point. Like we're not gonna change it. We're not gonna change. Like this is something that's ingrained in pro wrestling as it exists in 2024, and it's just going to continue this way.
If you're just joining us, because I see our viewer count has risen substantially since we introduced ourselves, I am Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Greg Parks. This is pwtorch.com contributor Brandon LeClair, and you are watching and listening to Wrestling Night in America here on pwtorchdailycast.com and the PW Torch YouTube page. We are here usually every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern live, taking your questions in the chat, taking your questions via email at wnialivecast@gmail.com, focused on the big shows in pro wrestling, which is why we are here live after a big show, that being Money in the Bank tonight. Last week, we were live after AEW Forbidden Door, so you can go back and watch and listen to that one as well. Next week, we'll be back at our regularly scheduled time of Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Brandon, I see we have Creighton ready to join us in just a moment to give his thoughts, but I've started a couple of the chats. I've been keeping an eye on the chat. I know we've had a lot going on here tonight in terms of bringing people on the show, so we haven't gotten to as many chat questions or comments as we normally do, so I want to go to those now. Joshua says the women's match had some misses, but it was still an enjoyable car wreck. I think that was kind of the overarching thought on the show as a whole is, in the Damian Priest versus Seth Rollins match, there were a lot of comments about them not working smoothly together. There were a lot of, as we've talked about, near misses in the women's ladder match. So it just seemed like a show that the matches were all pretty good. I don't think people docked them a lot for these moments, but it was not as crisp as some of the matches we've seen on pay-per-views in past.
Yeah, I mean, each match kind of had its own little thing here and there, but by and large, I thought that the action delivered. I mean, much more so than the last couple of WWE pay-per-views, which to me, or PLEs, which I thought fell a little short. I mean, I wasn't particularly bothered by many or any of the botches or misconnections or missed spots, especially in the latter matches. They're pretty much guaranteed to happen in those situations. In those ladder matches, I tend to look more for spots that looked overly choreographed or like they had to be set up for several moments in order to happen. And I thought they did a pretty good job in both instances of masking that. Everything felt natural enough, even if there were mistakes and botches along the way. Nothing took too long to get set up. And that's the stuff that really stands out to me and takes me out of the moment. So I thought they did a good job laying both of those matches out. I mean, if we're talking about just the misses and the different botches throughout the show, the only one to me that really set things back was Priest not kicking out of the Falcon Arrow. that put a damper on that match. Thankfully, they were able to redeem themselves because they had such a big angle coming. But that could have been really bad if that had just been the finish of the match and they had to just transition to the next spot with no Drew McIntyre. I wanted to note too, Sean had mentioned when he came on that he thought that Priest was doing really well up until that point, and I completely agree. I think that the in-ring work for Damian Priest has been the least of my concerns with him since winning the world title. Thought he had a good match with Jey Uso at Backlash. I thought he had a strong match with Drew McIntyre at Clash at the Castle, and I thought he had a good match with Seth tonight. It's just the incredibly weak finishes and the way that he is getting bailed out in these wins and looks like a goof with carrying the world title.
Azan says Cena and Cody is on the table. I know that was mentioned earlier on the show, but talking about John Cena, his retirement tour, what matches he may have left. Does Cena Cody make sense to you? You can kind of formulate in your head a story where Cody, in order to kind of cement himself as a champion, needs to beat the champion of the previous generation, a passing of the torch. We talk a lot about it. We hear it talked a lot about how Cody Rhodes and John Cena are very similar in terms of going out in the community and wanting to do things for the community and do a lot of PR for WWE and all the things that Cody Rhodes does that mirror a lot of things John Cena did when he was the top star in the company. And Cody has kind of taken it upon himself to inherit that mantle from John Cena. Is there a story there, do you think, that makes Cody Rhodes versus John Cena make sense as one of John Cena's final matches?
There's a story there. I mean, Cena or Cody is very much cut in the mold of Cena as the clean cut good guy babyface in the way that Roman Reigns didn't really serve that role when he was in that position for several years' time. Is it something that I want to see? Not necessarily. I think that there's going to be other stories for Cody. I mean, we have to assume that at some point they're going to revisit the angle with The Rock. That feels like something that should carry a lot more weight and gravitas than a potential match with John Cena. I also don't like the optics of a babyface versus babyface feud. I think that trying to turn John Cena heel on the last, run of his career is not something that you really want to do. I also don't think that turning Cody Rhodes heel right now is something that you want to do. And I think that with how well they've protected Cody to this point and ensured that he gets the babyface reactions that they want him to get, the last thing that they want to do is throw what will be at the time 3+ years of them meticulously crafting feuds for him that ensure that he continues to get babyface reactions. And I think that there's a chance that a retiring John Cena calls that into question. So to me, it's something that you avoid. When I look at potential programs for John Cena, one thing that pops up for me is the fact that, like Sheamus, who I mentioned earlier, John Cena has never held the Intercontinental Championship. That is an interesting avenue that they can take. One, because they have greatly increased the importance of the Intercontinental title over the last 2 years. It keeps John Cena out of a main event position where I think people might feel some resentment for him clogging up that spot, but it puts him in a really important place and gives him something to chase that he's never had in his career.
Go to John's comment next. He says, "Would you speak on Jacob Fatu tonight?" Yes, we will, John. This was big because it was his first match in WWE. He's come from MLW. There's always been a lot of chatter about him eventually coming to WWE. I think that he fits right in. That aggressive nature that we saw from him fits right in with the Tongans and this entire iteration of the Bloodline that is a lot more bloodthirsty, for the lack of a better term, than the more calculated Roman Reigns version of the Bloodline. What did you think of Jacob Fatu in his first WWE match tonight?
Really good. He was impressive, and I thought Michael Cole and Corey Graves did a really, really good job as selling him as a killer. I think that Cole driving home that point that he made on the pre-show about Triple H or Paul Levesque needing to pull strings just to get him over the border into Canada was a really strong move. And it helped highlight the viciousness, the dangerous nature of Fatu. I thought that his demeanor in the ring, the way that he moved, the way that he laid in his offense, sold that. I thought that he did a really good job leaning into the things that commentary was highlighting about him. He looked like a killer. And I hope they continue down this path. I mean, he was certainly impressive. That flip off the springboard at the end of the match was looked great, and I thought it was noteworthy that he was the guy to retrieve the lei to put on Solo at the end of the night. So all positive things for Fatu for sure.
And Rude Dog, back to Hedrick, he asks, kind of surprised, no Wyatt 6 stuff tonight. I guess he didn't really ask it, more of a statement. But yeah, again, this was a loaded show, a very newsworthy show. I kind of think taking the next step in the Wyatt 6 story would have been a little too much, a little too newsworthy, if that's even a thing. I think that's best saved for TV, and I think it gets people to tune in to Raw every week and potentially even SmackDown to see what's happening. Are you surprised that they didn't have anything in that direction here? I did think at one point there was going to be something with Chad Gable in the ladder match. Like he was going up the ladder and they pulled to a wide camera shot, and I thought, oh, are they, is that going to be, are the lights going to go out or something like that? So that was on my mind at the time. Is this better served to be a TV thing for now, or were you surprised that there was no involvement of the Wyatt Six group tonight?
I'm not surprised. I think it was probably the right move overall. Like you, I assume that the only place that they really slotted in where it would have made sense would have been in that men's Money in the Bank, costing or distracting Chad Gable. And I don't think the match needed it. I mean, the crowd was super hot to start the show off. They were into almost all the characters in that match. Could I see it having worked? Sure. I mean, Chad Gable is climbing the ladder. He's alone in the ring. The lights go out. They do the ding, and Nikki Cross or whomever shows up in a cloud of smoke. But then you kind of have to suspend disbelief with the other wrestlers, because are they just all down? And you're essentially you're committing to the idea that if not for the Wyatt Six, Chad Gable was going to win. So do you want to send that message? Do you want to send the message that all these other wrestlers are down just watching as this occurs? Because it's certainly not going to be quick. It's going to take several minutes for them to do their thing and the lights to come back on. So it extends the length of the match. And then what exactly are they going to do? Are they going to physically attack Gable? Because so far we haven't seen any physicality from them. And then if not, are they just going to stare at him? Is he going to jump down off the ladder and run away? I think it just introduces a bunch of unnecessary optics when we haven't gotten that far into their modus operandi yet. So I think not doing it here was fine. And you have, more eyeballs on the weekly TV product anyway, and they can continue to tell the story there and maybe get them out there on SummerSlam in a stadium setting.
Certainly getting involved in a match would be an escalation of that story beyond the point we've reached right now. So I agree with you. I don't think it would have made sense, but having someone show up to give another videotape or something like that, you could kind of see whatever the next step would be. The question, do they do it on a PLE? But like you said, probably stronger viewership on weekly TV. So that could be the reason for that. Creighton is going to join us here. Love to hear from him. Creighton, thank you for joining us here on Wrestling Night in America. What'd you think of Money in the Bank?
Yeah, I thought there were overall some pretty good spots. I would say overall it was a good show. I think first of all, that ending to Priest versus Rollins, you just knew it was a botch, because that kind of ruined it for me, to be honest. And even CM Punk screwing over Drew McIntyre again, and while at the same time screwing Rollins over, that didn't really save it for me. So if I'm back in Gorilla, I would not be too happy with Damian Priest. So, far as the IC match, I think Braun Breaker. I know he lost. I know there's some elements saying, "Oh yes, he should have won tonight." But I think I think you give him time, maybe develop his character, because I saw a lot of his moves kind of brought me back to Rick Steiner. But then he did the push up. Then he did the push ups as kind of a nod to his uncle Scott Steiner. I think he has the potential to be that heel, but he really impressed me. And just to give you a little perspective, I'm just now getting back into wrestling after a long time away. So maybe I'm looking at it from a different angle. I'm not looking at it from like a technical standpoint, but the other thing that stood out to me is like the way that main event, how it played out. It just felt like it was kind of a throwback to the old days of tag team wrestling, where the baby face you just see the double teaming on the face, can't get that tag. He's out there for extended time. So I guess it really, to me, I'm just speaking for myself. To me, it kind of told that story, but I'd say overall the botches notwithstanding, it was a pretty good pay-per-view for my first time watching one in like over 2 decades. So
wow.
Yeah. So
what brought you back, Creighton?
I think SmackDown kind of brought me back, just seeing the Cody Rhodes storyline, the Bloodline storyline, mostly the storylines on SmackDown. I haven't really gotten caught up to Raw yet, but even like SmackDown's been killing it. Hopefully Monday night I'll have a better idea like how I feel about Raw, but I think Paul Levesque has done what he's done the last year, really rebuilding the brand, remaking it into his image, kind of shying away from he who shall not be named. And I really like the direction WWE's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of feel that as well. On the Braun Breaker thing specifically, you mentioned that you think he'll make a really good heel. I think he's a guy who I can envision him being a really good heel and a really good babyface. That intensity and his offense. I don't know about his selling. That's something that I think is probably going to have to be worked on. But I think his intensity, his promo style, and his offense, Brandon, as a babyface could really work. So I think that's what gives me hope about the future for Braun Breaker. Is I think he could be a really good heel and a really good babyface.
Yeah, he's definitely got both sides of the coin down, because you figure tonight he's working as a heel, but his moveset by nature feels very babyface oriented because it's so powerful and impressive. It's hard for fans not to just be genuinely impressed by what he's doing in the ring, and that alone garners him some babyface sympathy. But at the same time, if he's hitting these moves against sympathetic babyfaces the way that I think Sami Zayn is and has been, he's able to still garner heat. So I think that he is a prime candidate for somebody who can float between those roles, hopefully not, too frequently back and forth, but over time throughout his career, I think he can make a really good babyface and heel. Creighton, you were talking about in the main event the sort of tag team work that you saw out of the Bloodline, and I'd say where you haven't been watching for quite a while, if you're interested in going back and catching any of the older Bloodline stuff, that's something that they really patented throughout their run under Roman Reigns. They have been doing this sort of long form tag team match, classic beat up the babyface, pull the big time sympathy for the babyface, get the hot tag late in the match. They've been doing that since the beginning of their run with Roman Reigns. And not to say that all of the matches have been excellent, but a lot of them are really, really noteworthy for the stories that they were telling, especially back during the run with Sami Zayn as part of the Bloodline, leading to his eventual turn. That's some of the best storytelling WWE has done in I would say 20 plus years.
Yeah, like I said, I get what you're saying, Brandon. Like I said, I'm I'm just getting back into it, but so far, like I said, so far so good. As far as the women's ladder match, all I can say is I think we are finally past the Divas era, because there were several times I had to be shaking my head like, okay, I know you're trying to make an impression, but could you at least try and get out of there alive? That was absolutely, it was just captivating but terrifying at the same time. And I just want to ask about the men's match. So the men's ladder match, I should say. Maybe I missed it, but did it seem like Drew was he had a few spots, but he kind of let the other 5 guys do more of the big spots before he came up at the end? Because that's what it struck. That's how it seemed to play out to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really effective for his character, being the heel, saying, okay, I'll let him beat everybody up. I'll play the chicken bleep heel, and then I don't have to get bashed into oblivion and still win the belt, or the contract, rather.
Oh, that would certainly fit Drew McIntyre's character. Let everybody beat everybody else up and then capitalize at the end. So I wouldn't put it past that being the story. But, also there are a lot of positives to the Money in the Bank ladder matches and ladder matches in general. But there are also a lot of tropes that get overused a lot. And one of them is wrestlers selling 5 minutes into a match like they've been in there for 20 minutes. And so what you see is 2 guys fighting atop the ladder while 4 other guys are selling on the outside of the ring. And sometimes that selling can be a little much. It can be beyond the punishment that they've taken, just because it isn't quote unquote their turn to be in the ring and to go up the ladder. So I think that might have played a part in it too. Brandon, did you get the sense that Drew was maybe not as big of a part of the meat of the match as some of the other competitors were?
I didn't notice it while watching or covering the match, but that doesn't mean that wasn't the case. I like you, Greg. I'm sort of desensitized to the idea of wrestlers, being taken out of the ring and staying out there for long periods of time during these multi-man ladder matches. But it would make sense for Drew's character, and it's also not really Drew's match. The other guys were much more fitting for a multi-person ladder match, whereas Drew typically is more of the straight brawler or straight wrestler, not usually involved in things like ladder matches. So I think it makes sense for him to be less involved. So I'm not sure whether it was intentional, but if it was, kudos to him, because I think it makes sense for the character he's playing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And hope to hear from you again soon, Creighton. All right. So interesting. New viewer after so long. I love getting these different perspectives. We had Heighton on earlier, who was giving us a live perspective from his first time being in the arena for a show. Very cool. Very cool.
I'm kind of jealous in a way of both. I
know you didn't mean it that way, but think of all the hours of your life that you would have been able to utilize in a more productive manner. Just think about it. Or maybe don't, because don't think about it.
I mean, what I meant it as was that it would be cool to experience, a live wrestling show again for the first time, or pick up on a pay-per-view of a company that I haven't watched religiously in decades. And I guess I could do that if I really, if I wanted to step away. But then I couldn't hang out here with you. So,
Well, also think about, when I think about when I got into wrestling, you're always very nostalgic for that era when you first discovered something. Yeah. And so there are people who are 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, just discovering wrestling for the first time, that are going to be lifelong fans. This is going to be that era that they are nostalgic for 20 years down the line when they're still watching it. So, when you think of different perspectives that people bring to wrestling, that's one of them for sure. Look at John's email here. John liked the show. And he has a couple topics for us to discuss here. So we'll do that before we sign off. By the way, NXT Heat Wave is tomorrow night, but We won't have a post show for that because the WWE Talks NXT folks, another audio show at pwtorch.com, they're going to be covering it. I don't think it's going to be live on YouTube. I think it's just going to be regular audio that'll be released later on. So we'll get their perspective on Heat Wave. Going to give us a little bit of a break tomorrow. So there will be Heat Wave audio. It just won't be us live after the fact. So just wanted to get that in there before I forget. John says, this is a topic about the new Bloodline and their savagery. He says, the commentary is really emphasizing the Bloodline being savages and having absolutely no morals. And meanwhile, Tama Tonga is kicking Kevin Owens really hard and Tonga Loa is doing the low blow. This is certainly brutal, but it isn't out of place with what other heels do. And they're doing it within the confines of the WWE's rules. The referee goes down and then suddenly the Bloodline starts trying some illegal tactics after wrestling generally a very physical style for most of it. Personally, I like the way they're being presented in general, but I feel like the commentators are going so hard on these guys being lawless, unrefined, immoral brutes who everyone should fear. I feel like they have the handbrakes on them, but hope they step up in savagery pretty soon. The match was awesome, though, by the way. So John's question is WWE overselling the Bloodline savagery? What I see in the ring is certainly wrestlers who are more aggressive. I mean, when you look at Tama Tonga and how he wrestles, when you look at Jacob Fatu and how he wrestled tonight, it was with the intensity turned up to an 11 that we don't see as consistently with other wrestlers. Certainly we saw it with Kevin Owens tonight, but that isn't the Kevin Owens we see every time he steps foot in the ring. Yet we're seeing it every time Tama Tonga steps in the ring. I'm sure we'll see it every time Tonga Loa steps in the ring, every time Jacob Fatu steps in the ring. So as long as they can keep that intensity up every match they have, they don't have to necessarily cheat because ultimately, remember, the Bloodline is about domination and you dominate by winning matches. Solo Sikoa basically kicked Roman Reigns out of the Bloodline for losing at WrestleMania. So I think you do want that aggressiveness, but you also, even savages need to play by the rules or need to learn to. So, if that is the direction they're going, I'm fine with it. I like what I've seen. I think it's fit the commentary that has been put out there. I don't think commentary has gone above and beyond what we've seen. But Brandon, do you agree with what John said? Do they need to be a little more aggressive and a little more maybe rule breakers to fit how commentary is portraying them?
Yeah, I mean, I get the criticism. I just sort of wonder if you want them to go harder, if you want them to be more aggressive, what is the step that you take? I mean, are they getting intentionally disqualified in their matches? Are they hitting referees and getting fines? Like, then you kind of run into the issue of like, well, is the authority figure going to suspend them? I mean, we haven't seen them draw blood yet, or actually they did on Kevin Owens, I think. So we might see a little bit more of that now that WWE has allowed blood to trickle back in on rare occasions. I think that will sort of add to the savage nature of this new faction. I think that if you run the risk of having a group be too aggressive and play too outside the confines of pro wrestling, you run the risk of setting up for pure disappointment when they try to translate it to in-ring competition. I'm thinking of groups of yesteryear like Nexus, for example, or Retribution, where they were just coming out and destroying wrestlers, destroying commentators, tearing apart rings, tearing sets apart, that sort of thing. It was fun in the moment for a big pop, but when it translated to the ring, it quickly felt like they just merged into traffic like everyone else. And not to compare them directly to those groups, because obviously members of this bloodline are much more talented than the majority of both of those groups. But I think that establishing some confine is beneficial to the characters as a whole. Because like you said, Greg, at the end of the day, winning is important to the bloodline. Domination is important to the bloodline. And they have to realize and acknowledge, no pun intended, that if they don't play within the rules so much, then they can't do that. I mean, they're not going to get anywhere just getting disqualified every time.
His second question was, when would you do Solo Sikoa versus Roman Reigns? Personally, I'd do it at WrestleMania to give Solo the chance to develop as a character. I think you do it at some WrestleMania at the earliest. Like, I mean, you have Roman Reigns versus The Rock potential. You have Cody Rhodes. I mean, you could do Cody Rhodes, The Rock, and Solo Sikoa, Roman Reigns. I mean, that is heck of a 1-2 punch. And John Cena's retirement. So I would say WrestleMania at the earliest. Wouldn't surprise me if you did it after WrestleMania.
Yeah, WrestleMania at the earliest, SummerSlam next year. I mean, possibly. It depends on
2-day SummerSlam next year, so you're going to need two main events.
Or are they going 2 years next year, or is it the year after? Because they're the Minneapolis SummerSlam is 26, not 25. I
think there was something. Are they doing Indianapolis next year? Is that part of that Indy is the Royal Rumble, right?
Indy gets the Royal Rumble. They haven't announced the location for SummerSlam 2025, just for 26. And I don't think that they've said whether they're going to 2 days next year or the Minneapolis year.
Well, I mean, if they do,
right.
You'd need two main events. So you could envision Sikoa versus Reigns being one of them.
Yeah, I would say, like you said, WrestleMania at the earliest. But it all depends on The Rock. It depends on where they're going with The Rock. I mean, are they going to go all in with The Rock and Roman Reigns, which is a huge match? Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly interested and intrigued by it, but I'm more intrigued by the story between Cody Rhodes and The Rock at this point.
Yeah,
which I don't think free up Roman.
Right. Yeah, so that's, I mean, a lot of balls in the air. Next topic is on Tiffany Stratton. He says, personally, I hope they don't do the predictable long wait for her cash in and get to her cashing in within the next couple of months, preferably as an honorable babyface. But that last part's not essential. I just think she is so naturally gifted in the ring, and her mic work is always getting better. And I think she's a once-in-a-generation talent. Waiting 8 or 9 months could create an unforgettable moment for Tiffany at WrestleMania, but I hope it doesn't badly impact her trajectory to the top by having mid-card feuds with women like Michin and some other women like that who have no real momentum or credibility. I personally think all the credibility Bayley has should be used to put over Tiffany in their first match, and Tiffany should win her first time and establish her as a top star. John's question, should WWE embrace Tiffany Stratton as a babyface quickly and have her win the title soon? Marketing is going to have a say in this, because I'm sure that they're going to market Tiffany Stratton Money in the Bank briefcases that she will have designed. So I think that's going to play a part. So if you do that, you're probably not going to see a cash in very quickly. I guess I don't really see the need to hold it a really long time unless you have a story. Like I guess to me, cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase in 3 months versus 9 months really doesn't make a difference, so long as the cash in has a story behind it and is effective. And so does Tiffany do the honorable thing? Certainly would not match the character that we've seen. She reiterated that heel persona backstage in her interaction with Trish Stratus. So, she's not turning over a new babyface leaf with this win or anything like that. And now that the men's briefcase is out of the way, I think it makes it more likely she holds it for longer. But I don't think it's a necessity. Brandon, would you rather see her cash it in quickly?
I don't think she needs to cash it in quickly. I think a lot of it depends on what the plan is for the partnership between she and Nia Jax. We've seen that develop over recent weeks. We know that Nia Jax is going to challenge Bayley for the women's championship at SummerSlam. So I don't think that we're going to see Tiffany try to cash in there or before then. So, we're talking at least another 4 weeks before we're really discussing it seriously. At that point, I think you can do it anytime. You could do it to give the women's division a boost in the fall. That probably feels like round about the right time to do it. I think that Tiffany has been de-emphasized on TV enough in recent months that it is important to have her hold on to it for a little bit of time to build her up and get her to the point where they can hit a crescendo with her cash in. So I think, at least get into the fall, see how things are going with Bayley or Nia at that point, whatever direction they go next month at SummerSlam. And then in the fall is probably when I would say pull the trigger. I don't even know if they need to necessarily, turn her babyface, or if they use the cash in to turn her the way that they did, like Dolph Ziggler, for example. That's certainly a possibility. But for right now, it's clear that she's going to be in this heel role for a little bit longer. I wasn't sure what to make of the interaction with Trish tonight, if it was just a means to get Trish an extra segment on the show, or if they were alluding to a possibility of a match there. I mean, even something at SummerSlam could be interesting if Trish puts over Tiffany. I mean, I think that would be a big, sort of passing the torch moment. I know Trish has had those with other wrestlers, but it would work pretty well with Tiffany, I think. So that's a possibility to give her something to do in the meantime, in the interim.
John's next question is about Chelsea Green. He says, I've been a big fan of Chelsea Green for a while and think she can be a serious act who maybe occasionally does comedy. She's just so entertaining, and I think they should strap the proverbial rocket to her back and separate her from Piper Niven. As much as I like her, I was still kind of amazed how loudly the fans were behind her, but WWE probably made the right call with Stratton. Question, how should WWE capitalize on Chelsea Green's potential and burgeoning support from fans? I think she could be a serious act as well, but I don't think what separates her from everybody else is the comedy. And she does it so well. I don't know why you'd want to break from that and kind of just put her in a line with all the other women on SmackDown or Raw. So, if she has a standout trait, which is her comedy chops, utilize it. I think her relationship with Piper Niven is super entertaining. I think there is so much more to delve into with that relationship, so much more comedy to mine with the Chelsea Green Piper Niven relationship, just because of how different they are. I think it would be too soon to break them up. Plus, I mean, honestly, it gives Piper Niven something to do, and she's talented enough where she should be on TV in a consistent role. And if that means being the straight man, so to speak, to Chelsea Green, I'm fine with that. It gives her something to do. So, are you of the opinion that maybe Chelsea would be more successful if she broke out of this comedy role?
I'm not. I'm with you. I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that it's so effective because she's so good at it. I think one of the biggest things with comedy and pro wrestling is, more often than not, it's bad, and not just bad, it's like really bad and not funny at all. And so when you hit on someone who is genuinely good at it, is actually very funny, can hit the right notes, has the good comedic timing, it's important to keep them around and allow them to add levity to the show that actually contributes in a meaningful way, not just in a way that, gets the rocks off of one guy that, he who shall not be named, so to speak. I think that that's really important, and they have that with Chelsea Green. I think the same way that they have it, to some extent with R-Truth over on Raw, though at times that's been a little grating because of the partnership with Miz and whatnot. But with Chelsea, I think that they really have struck a chord where she's over, she's entertaining, she is in a really, really good spot to be a featured talent on the show on a regular basis, because she's carved out a niche role for herself. And I don't think that moving away from that would benefit her. I think if anything, she would just kind of fall in line with a lot of the other women on the roster that don't have a ton to do. So yeah, I'm all for keeping her in this role, keeping her on TV, getting her fun spots, and allowing the crowd to enjoy the levity of it.
And John's final question is, as our old friend DJ from Miami would say, it's a little out there. It's off the rails a little bit. His question is how to deal with potty mouth fans. The kind of words coming out of the mouths of fans recently is quite refreshing in certain ways because the fans are speaking their minds, but also given there are also kids at these events and families, I'm actually kind of disappointed in the fans. Do you feel the swearing is a problem and maybe puts too much attention on the fans who are saying words that people in the ring or the commentators cannot say? If they're reacting to crazy bumps and are just naturally reacting with holy chants, that is one thing, but do chants like the ones to Solo reflect a little poorly on the fans? I like fans having a good time, but are they having too good a time? His question, what do you make of fans swearing without hesitation, especially when it's not in reaction to a bump, but directed at a wrestler in an unflattering way? Keep up the good work. Thank you, John, for your email. I'm more concerned of it from the perspective of on TV, it gets muted and things like that, and it makes for a very difficult listen when you're watching at home. I think it's indicative, especially the FU Solo chants. I think it's indicative of the way that fans are invested, and they don't like Solo Sikoa. This is good heat for him to get. Is it vulgar? Is it a bit over the line? I guess everybody has their own line, right? And yes, there are kids in attendance. I guess that is, if you're a parent and you're taking a kid to professional wrestling, that is the risk you take when you take them, that they might hear chants and language that you don't want them to hear. So you just need to be prepared to explain that to them. But I think, as long as it's not chants that have nothing to do with anything and are vulgar or are offensive and go over that line, I think it's good heat to get. But I understand the other side of it too, where it can be, like I said, if you're watching on TV, it can be kind of annoying. And if you're someone who doesn't like that language, then that can be a turnoff for sure. Brandon, where do you stand on the saltiness of the fans in the arenas?
Yeah, my only issue with it is same as you, the need to block it out on the TV broadcast, because it interrupts the broadcast. It makes the angle hard to hear, makes the commentators, have to repeat themselves or be completely unaware that they're not being broadcast. I particularly dislike it when they have to, turn the entire screen black. It happened several times when The Rock returned and they had like a big segment to really sell this angle with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, and they had to like black out half the segment. So when that happens, I'm against it. But other than that, I mean, I think that you just sort of let crowds do what they're going to do, so long as it's not offensive to, a particular group of people or discriminatory in some way. The language doesn't bother me. I think that it is par for the course to some extent with wrestling. And I think like the thing is that it is, as you said, Greg, showing investment on the part of the audience, which is not something that we haven't always seen. We haven't always seen, especially in recent years. The comment that you put up from Joshua, I certainly will take profanity any day of the week over what chance in particular.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I would take silence over what chance.
That too. Yeah. I mean, really anything. And this is awesome during non-awesome matches. Yeah. I mean, that chant has overstayed its welcome. And it's gotten to the point where it means literally nothing, because it's used with so much frequency. Sometimes I feel like crowds just convince themselves to do it because they haven't seen anything great on a particular show. And they're like, maybe if we will this into existence, it'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the profanity doesn't bother me. I mean, we've heard Levesque say already that when they move to Netflix, they aren't going to be worried so much about editing that out. I think that's a good thing overall. And I think we have to remember too that, WWE is a PG product, but for a very long time, they were on the lowest end of PG. They were bordering TVG for a while. And there is a large spectrum of TV PG that you can be within that WWE is now just beginning to play with again for the first time. There are a lot of things that they could do under the TV PG banner that they have actively chosen to avoid for a very long time. And that's why I always sort of laughed when people begged for the return of TV 14, because it's like they could still maintain that PG rating and do double what we're currently doing. And we're finally starting to see them do a little bit of that.
For sure. Look, Brandon, we have been talking Money in the Bank so long tonight that not only did Torch editor Wade Keller already record the Money in the Bank roundtable with Todd Martin and Rich Fann, but it's also posted for VIP members on pwtorch.com. So you can get done listening to us and you can click right over to pwtorch.com and listen to Wade and Todd and Rich give their thoughts on the post Money in the Bank roundtable, now up for VIP members of pwtorch.com. So Brandon, until next time, appreciate you joining us. I know that you write along with Wade on pwtorch.com these the alternative perspective report for these pay-per-views. Before we go, let the listeners and viewers know what else you do for the Torch.
I would just add too, Greg, that in our defense, and you know, not to.
Oh, I'm not saying no. I'm not saying that's a no.
Not to poo-poo what they're doing, because the post roundtables are great, and I've participated in many and enjoy them very much. However, they didn't get to talk to the people, and we did.
Exactly.
And not only that, we got to talk to someone who had never been to a WWE live event before, which was really cool, and someone who hasn't been watching the product, who just returned back. So those are two really cool perspectives.
So we're also not saying our show was better, but
we're not. But
it's just different.
Yeah. You can follow me and the work that I do for PW Torch each and every month. I cover WWE premium live events as well as AEW pay-per-views. I am also co-host with Greg here on Wrestling Night in America following those shows. Just a reminder to listeners, watchers, and to Greg, I will not be in the house for SummerSlam, but will return at the end of the month for the AEW shows.
Great, that saves me a DM that I'd have to send you in the next 2 weeks.
And for, what is it, Bash in Berlin, something like that at the end of the month. But anyway, that's a ways away. You can also catch me on a lot of PW Torch post shows with Wade Keller occasionally as well, talking Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite.
Awesome. Brandon, as always, thank you for being my co-pilot on these PLEs and pay-per-views, and have a good rest of the night.
You too.
Thank you. And don't forget, you can follow me on social media at Greg M. Parks. I post during these PLEs and hopefully a little bit more during Raw and SmackDown these days as well. So you can give me a follow there. And of course, I already plugged all the stuff that I do for the Torch earlier in the show, so I won't make you sit through that again here at the end. But thank you again for joining us here on Wrestling Night in America. We'll be back at our normal time because it's Sunday next week when we're on the air. And if it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America. Good night, everybody.